we'll bring the meeting back to order and start the recording again.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we're back to the agenda. We're on item 7 in the agenda, which is Internal Audit 23-24, Supplementary Annual Report, Performance and Quality Assurance. And we're going to our Chief Auditor, Ailey Mackay, will present this report. Over to you, Ailey. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. This is, as Chair said, a supplementary report to the report that you received previously on the 18th of April, which was our annual report, including the annual opinion. And both aspects of that annual reporting, 18th of April and today's, are part of our regulatory obligations as a council. So today's report is about our performance and quality assurance to provide further assurance to you as an audit committee. So, Chair, I'm going to highlight the paragraphs that support the recommendations, and then we can go to questions as usual. So if I start with paragraph 6 and 7, which relates to recommendation number 1. So I'm just highlighting the continued positive outcomes from the follow-up work we do. As you know, each council is required to establish arrangements to follow up all the internal audit recommendations. Now, we do that by physically going out and testing the implementation of the recommendations by all the services in the council. When we reported to you on 18th of April, that work had slipped slightly and we had only completed 5 follow-up exercises for 23-24. So I'm delighted to be able to report today that we've now caught up with that programme and we've concluded 14 exercises, which involved us checking 53 recommendations across the council, and all of those have resulted in 100% implementation. So that means that we've looked at what's been done in practice and we're happy that it's either been fully implemented or sufficiently implemented, which means it's pretty much implemented with maybe tiny tweaks still to be done. So that's a brilliant result. That's fantastic. I mean, particularly in the current climate when people are juggling even more than I think we've ever juggled before. And I'll go on to the sort of wider picture, the multi-annual picture on that in a moment, Chair. So paragraph 7 is just as a courtesy to committee to say there are 2 of the follow-up exercises that we have had to reschedule for various reasons, and we'll be carrying those out under the current year audit programme. And we're coming back on the 7th of November to present you with the revised audit plan for the current year for 24-25. But there's nothing sinister in the fact we're having to delay those. It's just a timing issue. We're working very closely with the services, and again, very, very good engagement with the services. So that's all positive. So if I move on, Chair, to paragraphs 8 to 10, which is with Appendix 2 support recommendation number 2. But I'm asking committee to note the positive outcomes from the performance indicators that are presented at Appendix 2. The performance indicators were developed a number of years ago from our first external quality assessment. Now, as you know, performance indicators are never perfect. It's very difficult to decide what's the best suite. Our suite's been benchmarked to other councils and is under constant review. So, you know, more than happy to take any feedback from committee if there's anything else that you would like us to include in that suite of performance indicators. I think for me, the one that I'd like to highlight today, now paragraph 9, there's a slight typo there. It should be table 4 that's referred to and not table 2. But table 4, which is on page 354 in your report, highlights the multi-annual position for the follow-up exercises. And we have now 3 years, in fact, we have more than 3 years, but the 3 years in which we report are all 100% implementation. So you can take a lot of assurance from that in terms of, I think, the added value of our work. So our recommendations are perceived by services as being of added value because they agree them they implement all of them. So I think that's really, really positive news. I won't dwell on the other indicators there. There's nothing in terms of significant issues arising, but happy to take any questions. So, Chair, I'll move on to paragraphs 11 to 13, which are supported by Appendix 3. And that is a requirement of our professional standards to present what's called a quality assurance and improvement programme, and that's what our standards call it. So the QAIP is the official name for our improvement programme, our action plan for internal audit. And again, Chair, very positive. That action plan has been pulled together over the years from various quality assessments, including our 2 external quality assessments, which have both been reported in full to committee. The first one in 2018 and the most recent one in 2023, which members will recall SIPFA carried out that exercise for us and joined us at committee to present their independent assessment of the internal audit function. So we continue to implement all the recommendations that have been made for our function over the years, and that is established continuous improvement for our team. The one item that I've highlighted in terms of recommendation number 3 is just the ongoing funding issue associated with computer audit. Only in that our computer audit function is partly outsourced, and that has been funded from service balances, which we have accrued from the vacancies that we tend to carry year on year. You as a committee approve an element of computer audit in the audit plan. This year you approved 23 days. We haven't actually used them yet, so I've spent nothing. So I'll maybe get a badge in the current the current context for that. Anyway, not spending money in the public sector is an issue as well. So we will be spending a wee bit of money, but we don't spend significant amounts of money on that area. We'd be talking in a really busy year, probably 20 grand, but it'll be significantly less than that this year. We will bring them in to look at some areas. It is important. Computer audit is an area I think that gives us all sleepless nights, particularly in terms of cyber attacks. It's an item on the corporate risk register, and we've always been supported by Joni's team to retain an element of balances to support that now, and that's an ongoing discussion we have with finance. So I'm just highlighting the risk, but that's been a risk in our QAIP since the QAIP was developed. If I move on, Chair, to appendix, it's still in appendix 3, but in observation 5 from EQA1. And I'll just highlight where we are in terms of page numbers on that. So observation 5 was regarding the reporting arrangements. So it's page 361 on your report today, members. And one of the recommendations from our first external quality assessment was to ask committee annually if you're happy with the reports you get from internal audit. So that is what recommendation number 4 is about, Chair. So happy to take feedback of any considerations you would like us to give, either in the mid-year and annual reports that we bring to you, or indeed the detailed assignment reports that are all available for you on the Councillors' Notice Board. And at that point, Chair, I will stop and happy to take any questions as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Ellie. It was just a quick question. I was listening to you chatting about computer audit there. Forgive my ignorance, it's just my understanding of what, and you said that, you know, it's outsourced. So when the people come in from the outsourced company and they're doing a computer audit, say they wanted to have a look at my laptop, are they basically looking for, as a computer audit, checking this machine to make sure there's no virus sitting on it? What is a computer audit?
So computer audit, it's there are basically two themes of computer audit. Now I'm conscious of the fact I'm sitting beside the guy who used to be in charge of computer audit at the Glasgow City Council. You can correct me if I get this wrong. So computer audit tends to cover two areas. So it's looking at systems, and it's also, so we will look, for example, the audits that we've done recently, we've looked at controls within systems. So we've looked at Liquid Logic and Controc, which are the business systems within health and social care. So we don't need to go and look at devices. We will look at how that software is working and how we'll look at the data, we'll look at the controls, we'll look at, for example, now when I say we will do that jointly with an outsourced supply. So the outsourced, the company we use for the outsourcing don't do the job independently. We work with them, and my team for the last number of years have been trained up as computer auditors as well as accountants. Now, with the best will in the world, you can never really make an accountant a fully trained computer auditor. It's a very specific skill, but we have developed our skills in that area. So Liquid Logic Controc is one recent example, good results. We have audited in the past, we've audited the open revenue system, which is used to manage all the revenue and benefits work in this council. So we would also look at things like, so as well as controls, so password controls, we would look at profiles, so to make sure that users of the system have appropriate profiles, so we have separation of duties. So people can't requisition, for example, and authorise within a purchasing system, for example. So that's possibly the sort of more traditional computer audit work. What we're moving into now, and the majority of this is actually being done within my team at the moment, is around data analytics and continuous auditing, and that's the future for us. And that will replace a lot of the sort of traditional audit methodology that we use. So when we use the term computer audit, forgive me, Councillor, I should have explained that a little bit more in terms of a definition, but the definition is as wide as you want to make it. Traditionally, it's been anything to do with a computer, with computer audit in the olden days when we had one computer between a team of 6 of us. But these days, it's much more embedded in our day-to-day work, but we do from time to time have very specific technical areas that we want the outsourced team to look at, and that's where we bring them in. So, for example, they facilitated a lot of the work we did around the compliance work we did to test our internal IT teams' performance against the issues that arose from the SEPA cyber attack. And there was a national gap analysis was produced, and our IT team very quickly tested themselves against that. We then looked at the evidence behind that testing, but supported by our outsourced computer auditors who are very much experts in that technical area. I hope that helps a little bit to sort of illustrate the work.
That does help a lot. So basically it's like ensuring our systems are robust against hacking, stuff like that. And also I followed 100% the thing about the dual control. I followed that. So yeah, I've got a better understanding of what it is now.
Okay, good stuff. So just through you, Chair, just as a final comment from me on that, you're absolutely right. So we'll look at the controls around the hacking, but we're really testing to make sure the controls we've got in this council, which are largely put in place and overseen by our corporate IT under Joe, are working well, and generally we find that function is working very well. But we will also look at the wider governance, risk management and internal controls just around how those systems are used within services as well.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Canning, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. Just leading on from that question, I mean, forgive me if I asked this before, and I might be wrong, but we've had at least one fairly significant outage, at least on email. I don't know how extensive that was, or because on a day-to-day basis, email is what we use as members. But I don't know how extensive that was. I don't know exactly what it was, but there was I think email wasn't available for a day or a full day, was it recently? And I'm not sure that there's not been another one within the last year as well. I mean, when that happens, do you do any kind of audit follow-up to understand why that happened, and if there's anything that's any learnings from that?
We find we tend not to, because operationally that's not my responsibility. It's the responsibility of IT, and they usually deal with it very quickly. I do keep a keen eye on that, and I keep a keen eye on the explanations. And when we have catch-ups with IT, we will discuss the reasons for these things happening and the remedies that have been put in place. And I've been assured with the work that's been done. And from time to time, when these things happen, they can be symptomatic of national issues, wider issues out with this council as well. So that wouldn't necessarily be something we're not the IT emergency service jumping to it any time that the IT goes down. That's something for IT, and IT have other assurances around the work they do. They have the PSN, for example, the Public Sector Network Assurance that they acquire every year, and that's referred to in the Corporate Risk Register. So there's a lot of other assurance around the IT work in addition to the internal audit work we do. The internal audit work that I do has to be focused on informing my statutory annual opinion, which is around the 3 aspects of internal control, risk management and governance. So yes, I would absolutely be making sure that I'm aware of what's happening in those areas, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it requires a redirection of our audit resources to deal with it, because it's usually being dealt with more than adequately within the council.
Thanks. Could you explain Public Assurance Network? What exactly is that, just very quickly? I mean,
the PSN is a requirement from Cabinet Office for all councils. I don't think NHS, I think NHS are still exempt. All councils in the UK have to be PSN accredited so that they can share information across public networks. And the detail of it, you would need to ask the Deputy Head of IT, Paul Toland, because he'll be expert in that. But you'll find a reference to it in the Corporate Risk Register, and it's an independent exercise that's carried out every year to test this council to make sure we are compliant with the benchmarking that's established by the Cabinet Office that each council has to comply with. And we've always been fully compliant with that, and in fact choose to be compliant with some additional, like Cyber Essentials, for example, accreditations. But PSN is currently the key required accreditation for all councils in the UK.
thanks, that's very helpful.
Thank you, Ellie. It's good to see that the whole report is green. If we're doing red, amber, green, everything's green. This is wonderful. Your improvement programme is page 355, and the computer thing again. There's not a risk because we don't have a computer expert auditor on your team. You're happy with how you can work it and how you can outsource and bring that in. That doesn't give us a risk or a lack of assurance anywhere.
Yeah, just to clarify that, Chair, we have gone out previously to try and recruit a computer auditor, and we just they earn fortunes out in the private sector. We can't compete with that, and we got some interest, and it was poor. There wasn't anybody who was employable at that time. That's a good number of years ago, and I came to committee at the time and explained that and said that we would be outsourcing from that point forward, and that's worked very well for us, and actually has been a very cost-effective way of doing it as well, incredibly cost effective. But my team are being trained as computer auditors. I've got one of my, our team are all qualified accountants, and when for the most part, to be an auditor, you have to be a qualified accountant in this council. So one of my qualified accountants has got CISA accreditation, which takes about a year and is probably the most recognised computer audit. Yeah, John's nodding away. John is an expert in computer audit, now my equivalent at North Ayrshire, so it's been very useful. So yes, so one of my team is accredited in CISA, another has studied it, and hopefully will be sitting the exam, and we've got another who's halfway through the study this year and should be sitting the exam within the next 6 months. So that gives us a little bit more resilience locally, Chair. Very cheaply, it's less than £1,000 to train them, so it's a very good investment. And so we've always taken that two-pronged approach so that we're not relying on either external or internal. So I think that's worked well for us, and it's an area that's not going to go away.
And that's brilliant that you're training people and they're getting extra qualifications. Would at some point in the future, would that negate the need to go out and bring in a contractor?
Well, my advice, while I'm your chief auditor, would be no.
Okay, thank you, Ailey. Councillor Canning, back in.
So just very quickly, it's not, I mean, given that this is an area obviously that changes exponentially, and you know, there is something in a specialist IT auditor that maybe general auditors can't quite get to, which is what the point you've made. It wouldn't replace necessarily, and you keep that budget, but is it something we could think about Ayrshire? Would that allow us to employ somebody that was on a higher salary and share that resource across the Ayrshire? Just a thought.
We have considered this, sorry, through you, Chair, Councillor Canning, we have considered this before. And in fact, we were close to having a wider solution than that, hosted by Glasgow City Council at one point. We had started the planning on that nationally. We have a very strong chief auditors group nationally. And unfortunately, one of the key staff in another council that was identified as potentially being the resource nationally was then pinched by the private sector. So that's what happens. It's a risk. It's a risk if you train somebody up to a standard. But the supply just isn't out there. The supply for auditors just isn't out there either. Every council's struggling to employ accountants and auditors at the moment. Computer auditors, they're an even rarer breed. They always have been. It was much easier years ago when computer audit was a much simpler function. It's much more complex now, and I think the twin track approach we've had, but we also get support through our SLACIAG network, and that's important. So that's their chief auditors network with the rather unfortunate name. Our chief auditors network discusses this at quarterly meetings. We benchmark, we share information, and we, in fact, I mentioned earlier that the focus at the moment is on data analytics and continuous auditing, and we have a specific focus subgroup that's supporting that work nationally, and that's where our current focus is. But we'll still continue to do some of the more traditional computer audit work to look at how safe our systems were, because how safe our systems are, because that's still important. But we're on the digital track, and that's what our data analytics and continuous auditing work is, following the digital strategy, and that's really important. But I'll bring you more information on that when I come up on the 7th of November to give you the mid-year update on the annual plan for the current year. And we might even, if we're allowed to, Chair, bring some slides for that committee to maybe explain this a wee bit more, which I think might be quite useful for all of us. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Ailey. Any other questions? No, nothing online. If we go back to page 346, recommendations on paragraph 2. I'm not going to read them all out. There's 5 or 6 recommendations, and it's all noting the report, noting the positive outcomes. Consider with reference to Appendix 3 whether committee continued with satisfied arrangements, and otherwise note the contents of the report. Are we satisfied with the current arrangements as far as our audit and reports coming to this committee? Yes. Okay, thank you, elected members. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda is item 8, Corporate Fraud Team 23-24 annual report, protecting the public purse, working together to stamp out fraud. We're back to Ailey Mackay, sorry, and assisted by John McCallum, Senior Manager, Fraud, Safety, Risk and Assurance, Corporate Fraud Team. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, John's got a much longer title than me, but basically he's my counterpart at North Ayrshire. And John has just joined North Ayrshire in the last few weeks.
5-6 weeks.
5-6 weeks to take over. But we've worked before with John because we used to co-work with Glasgow City Council, and John's actually carried out some audits for this council over the years. So he knows us well, we know him well. So we've hit the ground running already, which is brilliant. Could you just indulge me, Chair, for a minute? And I wanted to thank John's predecessor, Laura Miller, who was my counterpart at North Ayrshire for a number of years. Committee have met Laura on a number of occasions when she came along to help present the Corporate Fraud Team report, and she was a fantastic colleague and a fantastic supporter of partnership working. So I just wanted to note my thanks for Laura's work over the years, Chair. Thank you. So we've got a number of recommendations in this report, and what I'll do, Chair, is I'll very quickly go through the relevant paragraphs and then obviously take questions. So I'm actually, just when you read out the title, I'm thinking we may need to work on that. The title's now about as long as the reports. So you know the background to this is about protecting the public purse. You know why we set up the corporate fraud team. It was in the back of, and that's illustrated at paragraph 5. So it was in the back of the national move by DWP to take all the house and benefit fraud investigation out of councils and put it into DWP. So we had staff here that went to DWP. North Ayrshire had staff that stayed at North Ayrshire and formed a corporate fraud team. South Ayrshire did the same as North Ayrshire. They kept their staff, so we then ended up going into a shared service agreement with North Ayrshire for the corporate fraud team. So we've been in that now for over 7 years, nearly 8 years, and it's served us well for those years. Now, the current arrangement expires at the end of March 2025, and that's referred to in paragraph 6. So at the moment, and this is a wee bit later than I'd have wanted it to be, because I was off for a few weeks, the options appraisal, we're sort of kicking that off now to look at what's the best fit for us as a council going forward. So we need to bear in mind, what can we afford going forward? What can we afford not to do? But there are different options going forward, and a lot of that's linked into data analytics and continuous auditing work. So it is entirely possible that some of the digital strategy themed work that we're pursuing in internal audit will give us assurance in some of the areas that we've done differently in the past on fraud. And we'll bring that up to Cabinet and to this committee in due course. So where are we today? The update, the update of where we are for 22-23, the achievements to date as part of the main report. So that's highlighted in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. And that's summarised from paragraph 16 onwards. And, you know, it's all very positive. We've got a high number of referrals. So in Appendix 1 to the report, it's maybe quite hard to read because of the colours and the chart, and apologies for that. But in page 371, if you notice the last bar in the chart, which is the referrals that were received by the corporate fraud team in 23-24, and there's a tiny wee red bit at the top, that's the referrals from the public, that's 24. But the big bit at the bottom, the blue bit, is the referrals from our services in this council, which is 314. So I need to get to the bottom of that, because our services, and it's great, there's fantastic relationships being built up between our services in this council and the corporate fraud team based at North Ayrshire Council. But I need to understand where that demand's coming from. So I'm having a deep dive into that at the moment to inform the options appraisal going forward. The other areas I wanted to highlight, Chair, in terms of informing the recommendations are around the NFI. So very briefly, paragraphs 23 onwards give you a wee snapshot of where we are with the National Fraud Initiative, which, as you know, is run centrally in the UK from Cabinet Office. in Scotland by Audit Scotland, and there's huge participation in that, which is effectively a huge big data matching exercise to try and identify fraud and error. What we effectively get out of that as a council is assurance. We rarely get errors identified in that, it's assurance. But we'll bring up the national report to you in November, along with our observations on that. But that assurance aspect of the National Fraud Initiative is also one of the impacts that we get from the corporate fraud team. A lot of the corporate fraud team work has given us assurance over the years. So we need to reflect on that and where else we get assurance from as part of our options appraisal and what we're doing going forward in terms of the fraud arrangements for this council. And Chair, I think that's it for the highlights of the report. So positive report. It's continued very much in the same vein post-COVID, huge increase in referrals to the team, but we've noticed more and more that the bulk of those referrals are coming from our services to the team. They are identifying fraud and that fraud's getting caught, and but it's at very low level. And you'll see in Appendix 2, which is on page, I don't think it's got a page number, it's page 374 of your report. Sorry, the page number's hidden in my header. I've obviously not set that table out very well. You'll see in that Appendix 2, it's peppered with the words small recovery, assurance. The word assurance is there again and again from the exercises that have been carried out by the corporate fraud team. So basically what a lot of the work is showing us is what we're actually doing here is quite good at this council in terms of controls, which mean that our instances of fraud and error are low. And that's from reactive work around referrals, but also proactive work by the corporate fraud team around data matching in addition to this national fraud initiative. Now we're doing more of that in-house as part of our wider approach to audit methodology. So that again is something that's going to inform our options appraisal going forward. To look at, I think it'll be a different landscape. I'm not preempting what's going to come out of that exercise, but I think this will look like a different landscape going forward in terms of where we look as a committee and as your chief auditor, where we look to for assurance in terms of fraud and error in the council. So I hope that's been a bit of a speedy run through the report, but I'm conscious you've had an awful long day, members, so happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellie. And John, I was wondering if you want to come in, if you've anything you want to add.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for having us today. At the moment, probably not too much to say really, other than the fact that we are working together in the background to kind of bring together what the future might look like and provide some figures back to Ellie around the current fraud service that North Ayrshire Council provides. But obviously, some of the kind of key points that Ailie's obviously gone through there, the number of referrals and just a commitment that North Ayrshire Council, as part of the shared service, we do investigate 100% of referrals as well. So just to kind of give you that assurance that every kind of allegation that is notified or referral that's made, we will continue to investigate them at 100% levels. And not all of them have financial outcomes. There are some financial outcomes there that kind of help fund the service as well. So nothing else beyond that really at this point, Chair.
Thank you, John. Any questions from the room or online? Nothing online. I'd like to comment on page 371. I think the 64, it's 371 running on to 372. 64 housing tenancies recovered. I think that's brilliant work. With the shortage of social housing that we've got available and the huge waiting list we've got, people needing houses, this is especially very good work getting these housing tenancies recovered. So thank you for diving into that and looking into that for us. Hayley?
Can I just clarify on that? It is very much a team effort, and housing they focus on recovering the tenancy, and that added value that the corporate fraud team are bringing in is helping to chase the folk who've, particularly in abandonments, and particularly if they've abandoned them in a bit of a mess. So we are getting recoveries there, where that's helping the council to pay for any reparations that are due to that housing stock before the next people move in. So it's very much a team effort with housing. And again, we're currently having discussions, particularly with the head of housing, but other heads of service as well, in terms of their current engagement with the corporate fraud team and what that might look like going forward in terms of the best fit for this council. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ellie, and it's very good work. I wish we could do I wish we could do similar with the private houses that are abandoned all over East Ayrshire. But unfortunately that's not in your gift, it's not in your remit. Just as well. Yeah. Right. Thank you very much, Ellie. If nothing else, any other questions, comments? Thank you. We'll go back to the recommendations, which are on page 365. Paragraph 2. And they're mostly for noting. There's one that says agree, 2.5, agree the ongoing commitment of the council to participate in the national project initiative as referred to. So we're noting the report and we're agreeing. Okay, thank you, elected members. We move to the last item on the agenda now, which is item 9, concluded property transactions. And that's David Mitchell.
Thanks, Chair. Members, I'll not prolong matters. Members are used to this report. It comes once a year and simply sets out all the land and building transactions undertaken by the council within the reporting period. It's just part of the overall open and transparent approach to reporting council business, and it simply lets people see what we've bought, what we've sold, who to, and at what price, and it's all there with complete visibility. What members see in the appendix is we break it down to general services, acquisitions of land and buildings, and disposals of land and buildings, and then we separately report appendix 2 on acquisitions around and disposals of land and buildings for the housing account. The only ones really worth point out is in general terms, members, you'd see what you expect to see. You see where we have to buy land to deliver council projects, etc., such as the first couple there for New Cumnock flood prevention scheme. Bearing in mind the reporting period goes back to July 23, and also to support the housing development there at Mauchline, where there was a gap in the title that was found, so that had to be sorted out as well in terms of that new development. In terms of the disposals, a lot of them are smaller bits and pieces, but there are some buildings in there as well. The good news story I would particularly highlight is the one in the last line in page 380, where members will see that the deal has now concluded and we have sold the large unit in Cumnock to Farm Foods. That had been problematic. There was a tenant lined up to go in just at the outbreak of the pandemic back in March 20. The pandemic then put them into insolvency, and we've been looking since for an end use and outcome for that building, and happily Farm Foods have taken it on and seeking to expand their presence there. I think maybe use it for wider distribution. So that was a particularly good news item, and members will see as well in terms of furtherance of council policy, the transfers of New Farm Lock Community Centre to Take a Bow and the Netherford Community Centre to the Netherford Initiative for Community Empowerment. All I would say, members, in terms of the other appendix for housing is there are a large number of acquisitions there. Members will recall that previously council agreed a housing policy in the sense of where we own 1 or 2 in a block, then the mission is to sell, and where we own 2 or 3 in a block, the mission is to try and complete title and own all buildings in the block. This overcomes some of the difficulties of getting agreement from private owners in mixed tenure blocks when any repairs or maintenance works are required. So what you see there is the completion of the title of the 4 in a blocks for all of those where we've acquired, and what you see equally is the other side of that, where the disposals of buildings, pages 383 and 4, those are the ones where we've had the minority presence in a block and have sold that on. That's quite a lot of activity, quite a lot of conveyancing, all of which is undertaken in-house within the conveyancing conveyancing team, and mostly borne by one paralegal that we employ. So they've certainly been busy. We may need to look at a resource issue there if these levels carry on, but ultimately it should be the law of diminishing returns, because ultimately we must sell off all reach a point where we've sold off and divested ourselves of all the single ownerships and have completed title in those where we are already in the majority or on parity. So it's a bulge that should ease out over time, but we just need to manage that in terms of the demands and the service. But it has been successful in terms of the delivery of the housing policy. Thanks, Chair, members. If there's any other questions or any I've missed, happy to try and provide any further information or clarification.
Thank you, David. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Well, it's just a quick question to David. I was actually really pleased to see the number of acquisitions, because to me that must mean that, and I know that I've spoken to Blair in the past, head of house, and then obviously using the buyback scheme as a way of increasing our stock and dealing with the housing crisis that we've got in Scotland. We certainly have in East Ayrshire, because there's, Peter, you're right, as the elected members, we see it when the house inquiries come in that we just don't have enough stock, basically. So I was really pleased to see the number of acquisitions, and Blair has told me in the past that he's looking to use the buyback scheme more and more. So this to me was proof that it's happening. Chair, you made the point about the number of private properties in East Ayrshire that are lying dormant. There's a couple of those cases there where the details of the sellers would indicate we seem to be picking up. Probably we're picking up properties that were buy to let in the private sector. The reason I'm saying that is when we're buying off limited companies, a lot of buy to let landlords, certainly the more professional ones, form limited companies because it was tax efficient for managing their property portfolio. And where we're buying off a limited company would indicate that property or flat may well have previously been a private sector rental. So that's, we're maybe doing a bit of that. We're maybe buying back a few of those and putting them back out there as a council lets, which is good to see as well. Maybe I'm reading 2 and 2. Maybe I'm adding 2 and 2 together there and making 5, but that's what that would indicate to me. So no, the information and acquisitions was really good to see.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Richardson. If there's no other questions, recommendation 2 is the committee notes the information presented within the report. Thank you, and that's the last item on the agenda. Thank you everyone for your attendance, and we'll see you at the next one.